Knock knock, Daddy's home, and he's here to deliver some anime-related ramblings. Whether or not they're well put together, well, that's another matter entirely. Okay, it's seasonal roundup time. I am officially, this is probably the last place, the last time I'll move. The seasonal roundups have been recorded in a lot of different places. This is hopefully the final move. I'm not gonna try to jinx anything, you know, I'm paying a mortgage now. I'm not gonna try to, like, you know, you know, ooh, might go broke. But hey, there's a lot of interesting stuff this season, you know, some kind of like surprisingly good, some kind of surprisingly bad, some kind of surprisingly weird. Some kind of, I expected this to be good, and it was good. Some I expected this to be good, and it wasn't quite as good. Some I expected this to be bad, and this was good. We're all over the map this season. So, prepare yourselves. We're going in balls deep. Never done that before. Sorry, I had to get the demons out. Don is first on the list this season. And who would have guessed? This shit rules. Is anybody surprised? I've never seen a show animated like this. You know, there's not... I can't think of another show that looks even a little bit similar to Don. That's like, it's animated, like the way they animated it is so unique. And it gives Don its own identity, like, immediately. Like, you know, you've got your Jujutsu Kaisens, your My Hero Academias, or whatever the hell else, I don't know. But, like, nothing looks like Don. Nothing looks like this anime. It's cool. We all knew it was going to be cool going into it, and all of us manga readers, we knew how cool it was already, but like seeing it animated, it's fucking awesome, and I think the voice acting is phenomenal. I think Shion Wakayama is unbelievable as Momo. She is incredible, and just the pacing of it too, like you can tell how much the storyboarders and the animators love what's going on here, because it's paced really well. There's a lot of love given to even the most mundane of scenes, and you know, just like in the manga, it balances everything so well, right? Like it balances its silly slice of life romance with its unbelievably fucking wild aliens and ghosts and shit. It just has a nice balance of what you expect out of a kind of funny off-the-wall show like this, right? Like, the action is great, the romance is really wholesome and sweet, the characters are goofy and fun to watch, like, it's got it all. So I think Don, like, the adaptation just pretty much flawless. Like, I wouldn't nitpick pretty much anything. I think it's fantastic exactly as it is, and they really put a lot of love and care into the adaptation. So I am, as a Don fan going into this one, I was perfectly satisfied, very happy with the result. Like, even, you know, the goofiness, like, it never really feels out of place, right? Like, it kind of flip-flops a lot between the goofiness, like, or really quickly. It flip-flops really quickly between the goofiness and the kind of intense action. And even the action has some goofiness in it, because, like, some of the aliens are, like, talking about grandma or whatever, you know, like, you know, whatever they're talking about, feeding their cows, I don't know, like, or punching fish. Some of the aliens and ghosts are a little silly and gobbling weenies, right? So some of them are a bit silly inherently, but like that's part of the charm. So nothing to complain about here. I think it balances everything really well. Like it does a great job. Like even when it flip-flops, you're like, oh, you're. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again, right? I think if you have a good set of characters, of a good main cast, it doesn't matter what you do with them, like, or like how you flip-flop, you're just invested in them. So no matter what happens or how fast it comes and goes, you want to support the main characters, right? You want to, like, no matter what happens, you're invested in their story. So it doesn't matter, like, exactly what happens, or like maybe the arc doesn't the action doesn't necessarily develop their characters or anything. You're just glad to see them, right? Or like, and you want them to be okay at the end of it. So, and I think Don does a great job with that. Its main characters are like so lovable and charming, I think. So But yeah, like I said, the characters are all like immediately lovable, and there is, as Dandadan does, it occasionally catches you off guard and like conveys these really emotional scenes in a way that pretty much nothing else does, right? Like it kind of interjects, like we all know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the dancer. What's she called? The ballerina or something or other. Ira's spirit, essentially. Just the way that it conveys that emotion is, it doesn't use words. Just like in the manga, there are pretty much no words exchanged between any of the characters, at least in what the scenes that we witness as the viewer. It's conveyed perfectly through visual storytelling and just the characters' expressions and all that kind of stuff. And the storyboarding is phenomenal just throughout. Fantastic stuff. Nothing to gripe about here is Dandadan, I think, especially if you were a fan of the manga going in. I think it just nails everything. So can I just be happy for a second? Magilumiere, Magical Girls Incorporated, got its anime this season, and I am a happy boy for it. It was wonderful. It was much better than I was expecting. Can just get it out of the way now. The transformation scenes are unbelievably cool. Just like any good magical girl anime, right? The transformation scenes have to leave an impact, and they have to look visually cool. And even like recent magical girl stuff, like I haven't watched like Madoka Magica or anything like that, but like Tokyo Mew Mew doesn't quite, or doesn't nearly measure up to the transformation scenes in this. And Magilumiere was already a sort of more mature take on the concept of magical girls, right? So the giving Kana, Hitomi, and eventually Makino's transformation scenes all the love. I think even May's transformation, did we see that? I can't remember. But at least between those three, giving those transformation scenes so much love, I think it is just heartwarming, right? And I think it really helps just convey what Magilumiere tries to do. It's all about the magical girls, right? And I think the voice acting is fantastic here between all the characters. I think it's great, perfectly casted, and the concept is a little bit out there, I think, and it doesn't help that it got Prime Video jailed, but the concept is a little out there, so it's probably not for everybody. But it has such a unique premise, and then it's got this big world that it builds with not too many, but enough moving pieces to get your imagination moving. A lot of interpersonal relationships between all the characters, and especially Kana, who not only makes friends with the Magilumiere folks, but then starts interacting with Lily and eventually May and Makino and all this kind of stuff. So she has a lot of very different interpersonal relationships with all the different characters. So each, they're not all the same. They hit a lot of different notes, and you see Kana, actively see Kana grow and develop as a character, and it's slow, but it's really rewarding, I think, because you see it all, right? You see everything that happens to her, and you see her gain confidence slowly but surely. And the defining moment, I think, for her confidence is when she has that sort of, I wouldn't call it a standoff, but when she stands up for herself in the way Magilumiere do things with Mei Tsuchiba of Ast, right? So, and even there, when you compare it, the sort of conflicting ideals, or Magilumiere's ideals versus Ast's pragmatic approach, you see those very conflicting themes. And I don't want to spoil anything, but eventually we will learn the reason why that happens, and it's a very cool theme that it explores, where you have Koga and Prez going off in branching off in two very different directions from the same event. So it's really interesting the way they develop that, and there's a lot of moving pieces. I don't think we learned it in this, but I fucking spoil it. Who cares? I'm talking about Magilumiere. Hitomi's dad being the magical girl fucking president or whatever. Just seeing how Koga is approaching magical girls as head of Ast. It's just there's not too many moving pieces that it sets up where you're how is any of this gonna connect? I think you can absolutely see the vision. It piques your curiosity without overwhelming you. So I think it does that really well. And I say it once, I'll say it again, I think Kana is one of my personal favorite protagonists in anything going right now, in any anime going right now. I think she's immediately relatable, really charming and sweet, like just a immediately lovable protagonist. Like she's nothing super special, right? Like she's just a girl trying to find her, like what she's good at. And when people reassure her and build her up when they tell her like, hey, you have these incredible memorization skills, you can lead folks, you keep calm and collected under pressure, right? That kind of stuff. And she gains confidence in herself through experience and through the people at Magilumiere reassuring her. So it's like, I think she's fantastic, and I think the Magilumiere guys are just so much fun. Like everyone at Magilumiere is just a delight to watch. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of varied personalities, a lot of different sort of archetypes, if you will, that sort of make up Magilumiere and give it a nice balance. So there's even a good moment for Nikoyama, right? Like in the second half when they're at when the mutation happens at the conference or whatever. And you know, we got a second season announced. I'm fucking stoked about that. So it's going to explore even more come next season. I think this is just a delight. The visuals are awesome. The pacing is great. Even like it kind of starts off small, right? Like the things that Kana does one by one, they're not super compelling in themselves, but I think again, just watching Kana, because I think the first episode, if not the first two, immediately get you invested in her story, and you just want to see her succeed and become confident in herself. So no matter what she does, you just want to see her grow as a character. So even though she starts off kind of small and mundane in comparison to what happens later, it's fun because the characters make it fun, and you want to see, you're invested in Kana's growth as a character. Like and for Kana, right, like there are like moments where you see her, like, or at least it feels like she's grown a little bit. Like she's always kind of like this, but then for us as like the viewer's perception of her character growth, there's always like moments where we see it feels like she's earned the character growth, right? Like there's the one part where like she takes out the Kai in the shopping district, where she like comes up with that plan, and they develop the thing using the Alice system. They develop the original spell, and so that it doesn't harm the shopping district. And you know, she gets the little drawing from the girl, and that's a moment where you're like, wow, look at her, like she came up with that herself. She was able to she was able to develop that strategy and like have the confidence to rely on other people, and like even from Hitomi and Nikoyama, like she relied on all those people, and like they all worked together to get that done. And like that's a moment for Kana, like to like where you like see her growth as a character. It's like a step up, right? It doesn't pace it too fast too. I think the anime doesn't pace itself too fast. It takes it nice and slow so that we can really see everything at a good pace and like appreciate even the characters like Lily and Makino, who aren't around all the time. You get an appreciation for them because it takes it nice and slow and lets them stick around for a little bit. So yeah, just love Magilumiere. So happy it got an anime, and a lot of love in the anime too. A lot of love by the creators of the anime. They gave it a lot of love, and I appreciate that, even if nobody else does. All right, 365 days to the wedding. This is a pretty down-to-earth take on a romance anime. It's pretty charming. I didn't particularly love it or hate it. Like, the whole Alaska transfer thing feels like contrived, right? It feels contrived as a way to like set this up. But I do think there's plenty to like here. You know, like there's a lot of different supporting characters too, who add to the dynamic without really changing too much. And like, I think even the approach to the characters where they like kind of start off shy and they can't convey their feelings really well, in different ways, right? You know, they're two like sort of different approaches of the same sort of problem that they have, where they're not great at communicating with other people. And like the supporting characters help sort of expand the main character's perspectives in different ways. Like they learn more about love and marriage through interacting with like the supporting characters and stuff when they're not around each other. So like in that sense, it's good. And like, you know, I guess it's not something that people think about all the time, but like love and marriage is like different for everybody. Like I think the pacing is good. The story beats are completely inoffensive. Like I never found myself like not wanting to watch particularly. I don't really find it all that compelling or even all that interesting, but I think a lot of what the characters feel and what they go through, I think a lot of people could relate to that kind of stuff from them. Like a lot of what the characters go through and what they feel, like the problems that they deal with and work through like alongside each other. I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that kind of stuff. They're trying to work through their communication issues and that kind of stuff, like very earnestly. And it's good. And like the way they develop feelings for each other feels pretty natural. So like no complaints there. It's a pretty solid romance, I'd say. It's just a pretty unique approach to it. So, but I do appreciate that it rounds itself out too by episode 12, or just like Dunzo. So that's nice. I'm not sure if there's more in the manga or anything, but it sort of rounded itself out in a nice way, right? So I really can't complain too much. At least to me, it feels like just another example of an anime that just drives home the fact that so much BS in your love life can be avoided if you just find a way to communicate properly, like actual human beings instead of anime characters. No offense to the anime characters of the world, but a lot of them aren't great at romance, are they? All right, mechanical arms. How many times am I gonna sit here and say, man, I love original anime. I love it when they take the chance to make something new and it looks good in the first episode and then it flops. How many times? How many times is that gonna happen? I can't take it anymore. Look, Mechanical Arms, it wasn't bad, and I don't even think the setup was nearly as good as some of the other original anime I've covered on this show, on these roundups before. Like, I'll give it credit for its ambition. It really tried to do a lot of things in 12 episodes. It really tried to do a lot of things. A lot. Like, way too many. But, you know, to get out of the way, like, the animation in this is really good. I think a lot of the fighting sequences are really dynamic and cool and fun to watch. But again, like, it just kind of fails to get you invested on a fundamental level. So even though the fighting is cool, you can only appreciate that so much when the characters don't really have a lot going for them. Like, it's the most basic of basics. Like, it's another one of those where the plot never slows down enough to make us understand who these characters are and give us a reason to get invested in them, other than this plot is happening to them. It, like, who the actual characters are doesn't matter, really, which is a shame, because that's why you get invested in a show. Like, at least half the reason, if not more, that you get invested in a movie, anime, whatever. Like, so when the main character could just be, I don't know, some other guy who's mildly nice, who cares, you know? But, you know, like, again, fight sequences are cool. I think the visual, like, the art style and a lot of the visuals, like, the big city, so I think a lot of those visuals are really well done as well. But, you know, I mentioned it tried to do a lot of things. All of it falls flat, right? Because it never gives any time to anything. It needed to be double the episodes with exactly this much amount of plot. Right? Because we have no sense of who these characters are, and then the little development that they get throughout feels half-assed at best, because they don't give enough time to let anything sit and fester. It's just bam 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 plot. So because of that, nothing hits the way it should with the main plot. Like, I think the most emotionally compelling thing was with Aki and her sister or whatever, and like she was experimented on and forcefully fused with a mechanical arm or whatever. or she got taken over by the mechanical arm. Fuck. I think that's like the most emotionally compelling, but that happens like less than halfway through, and then the sis in like in essentially like 10 minutes, 15 minutes time that has elapsed total across the end of one episode and the beginning of another, she's just like fine. And then they move on to something else. So that's the kind of shit I'm talking about, right? Basically every conflict works perfectly in the main characters, in whoever the main character is involved. It works perfectly in their favor, so there's no consequences to really anything that happens as the show progresses. There's like a mystery involved with like, the main guy, head of the Mechanical Arms Foundation, or I don't fucking know what it's called, but the main guy ends up being the bad guy. Spoilers. Main guy ends up being the bad guy, like the brother unit of the main mechanical arm, the orange one, is actually a bad guy, and he wants to like return to the planet or whatever, return to their home dimension. I don't fucking know. And it turns out he's a bad guy, but that mystery didn't get unraveled. The bad guy, head of the organization, just shows up. He's like, "Oh, I'm evil now." He does the Batista. He goes. That's it. Like, it's not satisfying at all, because we didn't see it coming and there was no mystery unraveling. There was just nothing. And even the backstory of like the dimensions or whatever, there's like a previous guy who like the orange mechanical arm was bound to before, and he like died in an accident or whatever. Fucking, it's all just vomited at you in droves, and nothing is, you can't digest a thing. Oh, it's so unfortunate. To even drive this home, right? Like basically one of the last things that happen in like the climax of the plot, where it just becomes so much more blatant how everything is just fucking thrown at you and there's no weight to anything. It's kind of just fucking mishmash of shit. Like the two humans so there was a human that the Alma, it's in my notes. Alma is the orange mechanical arm, was derised to the human that he was derised to before, and then the one that his brother, this other human who the other blue brother unit was derised to previously in in their home dimension or whatever, and then they got blown up by by tampering with the whatchamahoozah and the glow in the dark cube or whatever the fuck. But the guys who blew it up, They wasn't the previous humans who were derised to the mechanical arms. It was just some fucking randos who blew up the facility and killed the previous guys who they were derised to. It wasn't anybody who had any relevance to the plot. It was just some fucking guys like, hey, what if I pull his finger and the whole thing explodes? It was just some fucking guys being dumb. It had no relevance to anything. So like the reason, basically the entire genesis of this plot with like the blue mechanical arm's revenge strategy, and by the way, I'm pretty sure he took control of the human he was derised to. The whole origin story of that was caused by some fucking randos who have no relevance to anything whatsoever. Like, it wasn't like so he's no one to get revenge on. He's just getting revenge on humanity in general. Like, humans will always betray you because that's the nature of humans. Cry, cope. Like, God, it was just mishmash of garbage crap. The plot is not good. Like, they had good ideas and it just wasn't done well. God damn it. And, and the actual climax, the main character is like, so you won't change your mind about humans? And the guy's like, the machine's like, no, I'll never change my mind about humans. And then there's like a fucking 2-second fight scene, and he's dead. Then it's done, and they go back to school, whatever. So basically nothing's changed at all, and I think Alma goes back to his home dimension or whatever. So basically we're back at square one, but now he's friends with Aki. At least there wasn't a romance there, because if there was, it would have fucking sucked ass. God damn it. This is one where I'm like, I see the vision, but because it was just mashed into 12 episodes, everything fell completely flat and the whole thing floundered. It was just a nothing burger because it all got squeezed into 12 episodes. It's such a shame. Like, it really is. It could have been at least pretty good. Alright, let this grieving soul retire. I have a problem. I have problems with this one. And I really wish this one was better, because, like, the premise is fine in theory. It's as good or bad as any fucking throwaway fantasy garbage, but Cry is not at all or Kurai, however you want to say it, he's not at all a compelling lead whatsoever, even a little bit. And 2 of the 3 major arcs are basically just excuses to show off how powerful his former party members are. Let's just briefly throw out some of my favorite shows, right? One Piece, Black Clover, fucking Eden Zero. Like, those are usually my go-to favorites. You support the main character because they're motivated to do something. They're motivated, they want to accomplish something, and they have the drive to do so. Cry is the opposite of that. So why should I care about him as a main character when he actually just doesn't want to do anything? Like, and it's revealed later on, right? The whole thing is like, let this grieving soul retire. He's tired of like playing up this act where he's supposedly super powerful, but he just uses a bunch of crazy items that make him OP and shit. It's literally revealed that he's like millions of dollars in debt and is just actively making it worse. And then he's like, oh man, I wish I could retire soon. Too bad I'm going farther in debt. Like, he's not, he doesn't make me want to cheer for him at all. So it's not like the comedy gimmick they have where he's like, yeah, everybody thinks he's super powerful, but he's actually not. It doesn't land at all because he's not an interesting character. He's not a character you want to support. He's just some fucking schmuck who's making his own life worse by his own choices. So it's like, why would I want to support this guy? Why would I laugh at these jokes that are being thrown out? It's not funny because, like, if it was one thing if he was a likable guy and he was at least trying to make his life better and at least making an effort to retire, but he's not. He's just making everything worse. And it's not like he even does one thing that even resembles anything cool, which really he doesn't do anything cool at all, but like anything that even resembles something powerful or strong, he does on accident, or it's not even him and it's just like something he has on him that activates automatically. So we're like, why does he even have this reputation? Why is he like regarded so highly? Because he doesn't do anything. He literally like encounters danger, throws the bitch with the big thighs right in front of him, and he's like, you take care of it, I'm gonna hide over here. And speaking of the supporting characters, they don't do anything. Even the former party members are one-dimensional characters. Like, it's just not good. Like, the way they have it set up is like, you see what they were trying to go for. Like, it's kind of like conceptual opposite of how the Eminence in Shadow is done, where it's like this, you know, in Eminence in Shadow, he's like this super cool dude who's like, you know, mega powerful, but is like pretending to be cool. He's actually just some kid running around dicking around. But he's pretending to be really cool and everyone regards him really highly for it. Whereas this guy is not trying to be cool, didn't earn his reputation pretty much at all. Just basically by complete accident, he earned his reputation. And everyone regards him highly and practically worships him for it. Like, you know, he's not trying to be cool at all, but everybody thinks he's cool. Like, so you see what they were going for, but it just doesn't land at all, in my opinion. And it's mainly because I think Kurai is just not an endearing lead in any way. Like, he basically like takes advantage of people's feelings for him. He like to get more money and get further in debt, by the way, to buy shit he doesn't need, and that's not going to help him retire. And like, you know, there's a bit at the end like where like the face relic or whatever was like has a threshold where it can only take over people over like that are X powerful, that are X level powerful. It takes over this princess a little earlier on in like the previous episode or earlier in that episode, in the final episode, and then it latches onto him and he's like, can't take over, the mask is like, can't take over this body, too fucking weak, and then drops to the ground, and it was like, and the guy's like, well, it probably sucks anyway. Even though he like got the thing he had spent the last 4 or 5 episodes trying to get, he finally got it, and the thing was like, well, I can't do anything. So it's basically all worthless. And even like characters like, what's her name? Big Thighs. that kind of had potential to be worked on and like have development don't. Like her only character trait is that she like worships Cry, and you know, for no good reason at all, when literally he just throws her into his problems for no fucking reason. So I think it just falls flat. Like it doesn't work on any level in my opinion. Like even the story arcs are just tolerable at best, and the ending sucks. Like it's just reinforcing shit we already knew from the beginning. Like nothing changes, and it's funny a grand total of like 2 or 3 times. Like it has some good action sequences here and there, and it's not like it's not enjoyable like most of the time. Like most of these characters are completely one-dimensional, and they had potential to be more fun. Like a lot of the ladies come to mind, like had potential to be at least decent characters, and they just ended up being completely one-dimensional. Is just not. It's not really like it's not like a connected plot, so everything just kind of feels pointless. Especially the ending just kind of drives home how fucking pointless everything was. So yeah, I didn't really like this one. The world's most notorious talker runs the world's greatest clan. This is very close to fully committing to the whole edgy protagonist thing. That edgy protagonist that doesn't take shit from anybody, but has like he has motivations that like generally make sense. And you know, there's still in this show, there's still like, you know, the boobalicious kind of fan service you expect in moderation in this show as well. So like it has the edgy protagonist who's cool and capable, and with still a lot of big titties in this show. So it's like the appeal's pretty evident from early on. I think this does an okay job. I think the plot is not bad. I think, again, this is another one that doesn't introduce too many characters, so it doesn't ever really overwhelm you too much. And even like the characters that only play into the little bit, that end up only playing into a little bit, like the heroes party comes to mind, right? That are sort of who the main character executes his plan upon in the final arc of these 12 episodes, to like separate the much more talented hero from their less talented squad. They feel like they're worth something, at least. Like they're there to fill a space, but they're not like, you know, they have some amount of character, so they're not like nobodies. They're not just like NPCs. They're not who they are like contributes to the plot and stuff. So like fine, whatever. But I think it's pretty two-dimensional. Like especially the main guy is just like, he's just like this cunning, like capable, weakest guy of the weakest class, who like, you know, in fairness, his moments like where he like deceives people and like lies and like all of his stuff generally makes sense, and it does end up helping him in the end. And like his fights are generally fun to watch too, especially like his fights with the eventual party joiner with the swordsman guy. And I think what's her face, the assassin girl, thief girl, she's fun. Her fights are fun to watch too. So I don't think their character dynamic is anything really good at all. Like, I think it's fair, it's passable, especially once the swordsman joins. I think it becomes a lot more tolerable after that, because I kind of enjoy the thief girl and the swordsman guy's arguments. I think they're at least kind of fun. But yeah, like, everything generally makes sense, like the main guy's motivations and all that, like, and the things he does come to benefit him in the end. So like, it totally makes sense. And like the way he is a talker, he's a talker in both senses of the word, right? Like, he's a talker, that he's smooth and very clever with his words and like how he communicates with people, and also he's a talker in terms of that's his class, and like he uses support spells that are based upon words. So it's clever, it works. I think the world building is fine. Like, it's nothing really to write home about, I think, but it's definitely not bad. Like, I think this definitely has the potential to be like that one show that someone who was like 17 or 18 got really attached to, and it's like, oh, I'm good, I want to know what happens next, I'm gonna read the light novel. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it has the potential to really appeal to a very niche subset of fans, right? So like, because it's very sensible. Everything it does is pretty sensible. So and the story arcs are like reasonably interesting, and like, even though there's kind of like a pattern to them, that it feels like they're kind of they become kind of formulaic almost. And nothing that they do like, no one thing, like no one arc is particularly noteworthy, other than that he kind of recruits people as the arcs continue. everyone else, like even like they're the blonde girl or whoever, like, you know, the supporting characters are generally inoffensive. They don't really take away anything, so I'm like, whatever, who cares? But, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, it's pretty much exactly what you expect going in, and you're not disappointed. Like, it doesn't drop the ball or anything, so it's just a fine, sensible little watch. For people who like their main characters nice and edgy. Like, properly edgy, though. Like, mean-spirited and, like, kills people and shit. Okay, You Are Miss Servant. This is fine. It's, like, uninspiring, but it's cute. You know, like... whatever. Like, you know, like, basically everything that this show tries to do, either Spy Family or Violet Evergarden does it a lot better. But I think it, like, sort of combines ideas from those two things into, like, this kind of cute little, I guess it's a romance? It's fine, right? Like, it's completely fine. And you know, it also tries to incorporate the whole fulfilling school life that it feels like every slice of life anime wants to do. So it combines, like, ideas from Violet Evergarden and Spy Family into, like, this fulfilling school life they're going for. And it's fine. Like, I think, you know, it checks all the boxes, right? Like, it's got, like, you know, we see characters from the maid girl's from Yuki's past come into play at points, who end up sticking around, and, you know, there's a lot of, like, comedy boxes that are checked off where, like, you know, Yuki will get, like, jealous and stuff, or, like, protect the main guy from, like, a bunch of different crazy situations. It just kind of has everything to have this, like, nice little recipe foundation for a mundane but cute and sweet and mildly heartwarming slice of life anime about a former assassin who learns to have real feelings and enjoy soy sauce or whatever, or tonkotsu, so I forget, whatever. Ending is kind of bleh, but other than that, like, completely inoffensive. Like, this is something you can just kind of put on and it's cute and it's mildly charming, and I'm like, cool. Like, it puts a little smile on my face, you know. Like, I watch this and I'm like, this is all right, you guys, and then I walk away and forget about it in 5 minutes. Yeah, you know, the main character is nothing like, he's pretty much a nothing burger. He doesn't, like, he has some past as well, like some kind of things with his parents or whatever, and, like, his dad comes in at some point. It checks a lot of boxes that should be checked according to, like, storytelling 101 rules, right? So, like, it's fundamentally sound and it's cute and wholesome and it's fun, whatever. Cool. Yay. All right. So the surprise of the season, Demon Lord 2099. This shit fucks. This shit is awesome. So this is one of those light novels that I've seen on the shelves in sort of recent months that has piqued my curiosity, but I've never took the leap and read, and now I'm changing my tune because I'm definitely reading this shit. It is awesome. Like, this is another one that just builds its foundation and premise, like, so nicely. Like, it immediately sets up exactly, like, what it's gonna be, and it is that, right? Like, it does some things and, like, kind of, you know, adds characters and, like, sort of changes things, you know, little by little, and, like, kind of throws you for loops here and there, but what it does is completely sensible from every aspect, and basically, like, the plot that it does execute, it completely makes sense based on the foundation that it built. Even, like, the way it builds, it's, like, slowly but surely, and, like, it all makes sense. Like, even if we don't fully understand the backstory of, like, what happened with the downfall of the demons, like, in its entirety, it's not like it ever deviates so much that it's like unbelievable, you know? Like, the first big plot point is this guy who was formerly one of the Demon Lord's underlings, who, like, developed some invention and became a corporate CEO, corrupt corporate CEO. Was like, he basically became Shinra, right? He became Rufus Shinra, and is now, like, essentially ruling over over the whole city, over all of like the 2099 Tokyo or whatever, because he has I think he made like he basically made igniters. He basically made Metaphor ReFantazio igniters and put them on everybody, and they can cast like smaller magic spells or whatever. And so but he was like, you know, he's introduced in like episode 1. Like we see this guy in episode 1, and then he turns out to be like the big bad guy of like the first arc. So it's completely sensible. Like, even I think, you know, the new, you know, main guy and Machina and other girl who's like a hacker, genius babe, or whatever she says she is, I think they have a really fun dynamic. And even this is like one of those few where I'm like, I think the content creation aspect, it's not a main focus, but it completely makes sense and it's actually funny. So like adding the content creation aspect to the Demon Lord's character fits with the setting that they're in, and the goals that they have completely works. And you know, it just has really sensible storytelling throughout, good pacing. Like it really lets the characters fester and lets you get to understand who they are as characters, and you know, become invested in what they're doing. So you're just happy to see them. Like, I think the dynamic between like the Demon Lord and Machina is not like a standard. It's not just like you know, subordinate and Demon Lord who like eventually grow to love each other. It's a little more deep than that. It's a little more dynamic than that. So it's fun, right? Like, and even with the addition of the thief hacker babe, she doesn't take away from anything, and she's fun to watch alongside the others, right? And like a lot of what it does with the reintroduction of the hero is really cool. And like when he comes back in the final episode and he's like, let me help you, Demon Lord, it's such a satisfying moment, because we've seen exactly like what like the relationship that they had and how it changed now that, you know, the Demon Lord has reawoken in a completely new setting, right? So like it's such a satisfying thing. So like the storytelling is really nice too. Like it just has everything figured out, and it just is so satisfying to watch and so compelling. Like, I think it's just an absolute blast to watch. Like, it's nothing too crazy, but it's just a really fun watch. And again, the characters make it work. So it's such a huge thing, and I'm a big fan of this one. Like, and I think even the visuals, like the fighting sequences, they don't slack off on the fights. Like, a lot Machina's fights come to mind, and then the final fight comes to mind. And the visuals too, like in that final episode with like the big city in the background, it's like glowing red or whatever it is. God, it's awesome. It looks so cool. So it's just really well done. And I even like the addition of the blonde girl, whose name I forget, but who becomes very integral to the second arc in the second half. Her character arc works. Like, it's not the best thing. It's not the most compelling character arc I've ever seen. Like, I think they probably could have paced it a little bit better, but generally it makes sense, and I think it works really well. Like, we see everything she went through, like, it gets paced out really nicely, and we, like, come to understand her character, and then, like, when it eventually comes to a head, it's, like, really satisfying to see, and I think it just works. So, like, this one's the big surprise for me. I think this was awesome. Like, I think it works on every level. So, big recommend for me on Demon Lord 2099. I think it's just fucking awesome. And I think Toa-sama, who made sporadic cameos throughout this, is just like, you know, on screen sometimes, like, you know, just at bars or whatever, she's just on screen. This is one she can be proud of appearing in. This is a banger of a show. All right, I'll be a villainess who goes down in history. This is just competent. I think it's fine. Like, I think the romance is a little weird, but generally pretty much a lot of it makes sense, and I really like the main girl. I think the way she commits to her bit, I gotta appreciate that, right? Like, she's like, she realizes immediately she's reincarnated as Villainess, and she understands the assignment. But, you know, like, the main girl leaning into her whole villainous shtick and, like, being all proud of herself for it, I think it's charming. Like, the romance, so, like, about the romance being weird, I think it almost feels out of character, especially the beginning. This is a thing I'll say in, like, every shoujo I review, but, like, a lot of times the main guy getting, like, really up close and personal for, like, no reason, like, immediately with the main with the protagonist kind of feels weird, but I do think like his Duke, is that his name, blue guy, who develops feelings for the main girl, it makes sense. Like, I don't think the romance ends up being bad, and like it kind of develops and leads to a weird spot in the actual story as a whole, so it kind of leaves off in a weird spot, but I think it generally makes sense and like fits what the story had done and their characters, so it's fine. But yeah, I think everything it does is sensible. I think this is definitely in the upper tier of like Reincarnated, Villainess stuff, and like the upper echelon of these kinds of shows. I think it's sensible. I don't think it really does anything necessarily wrong or like that like kind of takes away from what it had done or any like the story in the world that it had built, like, and you know, even some of the side characters are fine, like you see what they're going for, and I think they add to what's happening, and it has some things about it that are like different, kind of catch you off guard a little bit, and you're like, whoa, okay, this is new and interesting, and I like how this is developing. So yeah, I think it's fine. I think one of the more interesting things about this one is how they do the heroine, not the main girl, but the actual heroine of the dating sim world. She has this like subconscious ability to hypnotize people into like really loving her and like doing anything for her and that kind of shit. She eventually realized, like, the main characters have to tell her that she's doing that, and she has to be like, okay, like, I just wanted Duke to love me and all this garbage. She kind of snaps a little bit, which is a good like way to round out that whole like angle of not trusting her. A lot of the folks at the school not really trusting her, that had been building since early on. I have nothing to complain about, really. Like, it's not something that is my cup of tea, but I think it's sensible in what it does and how it executes everything. So, and I like the main girl. So, all right, Ranma 1/2. Unsurprisingly, this is a delight. Would you believe it? In a lot of the same ways that Urusei Yatsura is, right? But I actually think the way this does things, where it kind of ties everything together a little more cleanly, I think it's more appealing to me as a viewer, just on a personal level. And I think I even like the romance in this a fair bit more than I like the romance in Urusei Yatsura, because both of them have this, this one especially has this sort of, the way it does romance is they develop feelings for each other. The main two characters, Ranma and Akane, they sort of develop feelings for each other as very naturally without really showing us viewers actual signs of it as it goes on, like as they spend time together, which it's completely sensible, right? Like, because in real life, that's generally how it happens. Like, the more you spend time with someone, the more you're just going to be attached to them, and oftentimes that leads to romance in some form or another. So in that sense, I think it works, and I think this one's better and makes more sense than it does in Urusei Yatsura. But again, a lot of the main two here have a lot of the same problems that the main two in Urusei Yatsura did, where they can't quite communicate their feelings clearly. And it's because they're like 16 or 15 or whatever, and it happens. I've been there too. But yeah, like the shenanigans that goes through and like the way it interweaves all these different characters is really charming, and I think it makes for a really fun watch. The animation in this too, like, it goes hard. Like, I love the art style, and the animation really like comes out of nowhere and surprises you a lot of times. So I think they put a lot of love, like the Urusei Yatsura reboot. This had a lot of love put into it. This reboot had a lot of love put into it. So I'm really, I appreciate what they did here for sure. And this is another one that I'm just glad to have, like, I don't know if I would have gone back to watch this, like to watch the original. So it's nice to have like a reboot of it. I think it just works. Obviously it does. Like, the comedy just lands. I think all the different character dynamics just make for a really kind of fun, goofy little show. I really enjoyed it. I think it was a grand old time. Nothing crazy by any means or like ultra compelling, but I do think what it did was very fun, and I don't particularly like where it left off, but again, we got another part announced immediately afterwards, so we're gonna get more. So I am excited about that. So I am curious to see where it goes. So That's all you can ask for, really. But yeah, just a good old time with this one. Okay, next up is Yakuza Fiancé. There's another one where I think the main character really carries this whole thing. She's great. I really love the main character, the main girl in this one. She's another one where you're like, you just want to root for her, like almost right off the bat, I think. She gets kind of immediately thrown into this weird fucked up situation. And, you know, not by, you know, it wasn't supposed to be all that fucked up, and then turns out the guy she's supposed to marry is a fucking wild guy. He's on some shit, and it gets weird from there. But yeah, I think it's fairly compelling for what it is, and a lot of the action sequences are like pretty realistic and just cool to watch. The characters other than the main girl don't really do anything for me. Like a lot of times the main guy really weirded me out. The writing I think is good generally, and you know, especially when it starts developing the plot and like all this, the wild chessboard of people moving everywhere and like how everything's like linked together. It like, you know, all these different characters doing all manner of different shady shit. It's kind of fun, and like it provides for this pretty compelling, I guess it feels the same as like watching like a true crime something or other, you know, like it's like a sense of curiosity and like, oh man, like I guess it would be intrigue, like, oh man, what's gonna happen next, you know, like like some of the later plot points do have that element, but I don't really, again, a lot of the side characters don't do anything for me, and I think the romance is fine. It's inoffensive for what it is. I think it could have been worse, and it would be hard to like point out any one thing that happens in the plot, because it's like really all over the place, and not a lot of it really connects to the romance itself, which is like I think what's supposed to be the main focus of what's going on here. But ultimately, I do think it is an enjoyable watch, but it's not for everybody. It's all right. I didn't hate it. I didn't really like it that much, but I'm definitely on the side of liking it more than hating it. Like the writing is fine, like it's kind of dynamic and really plays on what we know about the characters, and like it does well. I think it really portrays the main girl in a great way. But yeah, it's just bizarre, and you like kind of have to go in expecting like if you've played a Yakuza game, you'd probably be like, oh yeah, that's just Yakuza. That's just what's going on. Like, I think if you want to set temper your expectations for this one, play a Yakuza game first, and then you'll be ready for this one. All right, Acro Trip. This is a delight. I just, it's over the top goofy in the right ways, right? I just can't help but love it. It's just got a fun premise, consistently enjoyable characters, and funny, and like the situations they get put in are funny and executed nicely. And even like the characters are like kind of semi almost compelling in some ways. This was another one where I'm like, I don't really care. I just like what it's had, like the foundation it laid, and then what I want to see how it builds on it, right? And you know, when it does some characters' backstories, it even surprises you that out of nowhere. Turns out like the guy who turned in Pinky to a magical girl was formerly a human and formerly Chrome's buddy, partner in crime or whatever, or like buddy in the crime school or whatever the fuck, like evil super mastermind school or whatever the fuck it was. It just has a really fun premise, and I think it builds on it completely sensibly, and the comedy is well executed, and it just gets a big thumbs up from me. I think it was just a delight. So it's very it's a lighthearted sort of spin on the magical girl situation. It reminds me like a lot of the shenanigans, Chrome and Purple. A lot of the situations that the main two characters end up with remind me of Team Rocket. It's Team Rocket-esque evil villain shenanigans, right? So in that sense, it's very charming, and I just think it works. So it even develops a semi-compelling narrative. I wouldn't call it really compelling, but it is like, there is a semblance of a narrative there where it like builds upon what it had already done. Like, it's not just a bunch of random shit. So like, it does build something. and it ends in a better place than where it started. And like just like the Chrome like wanting to take over the world honorably, this and the silly fangirl who just wants to see her Oshi in action. It's just really charming. Like, I think it's just a delight. So I really enjoyed Acro Trip. It made me smile, right? Fuck it. Like, that's all you need. All right, Loner Life in Another World. This one is a complete nothing burger for me. It is just the most basic isekai of all time. Like, I've seen better isekais in my dreams. I think I might be having more fun if I was like 10 years younger. If I was like 15 and I'm like never seen an anime before. That was mean. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't bad at all, really. It's just completely nothing. Like, I could have spent however long I watched this staring at a wall, and I would have gotten the same amount of fulfillment from it, And in fairness, it does have like some it doesn't just throw these characters into another world and like the guy builds a man cave or whatever, and like all the girls are like, wow, you're so capable, and then they start like manhandling him or whatever, and they, like, make him do their bidding. And like there is some interesting stuff, like the class dynamic, like how they split up into factions and stuff, and like how they fucking so some of the boys had like gone rogue or whatever, and the girls are like trying to fight and like deal with it because the girls have never played a video game before. They don't know how this stuff works. You gotta leave it to the guy who's played a video game before. There's a guy, like one of the nerds, who like went rogue and like tried to like fucking kill everybody or some shit, like, and then ended up getting killed. I don't know. There's that guy. There's like the skeleton girl who gets introduced later on, like that dungeon, like. There's a whole thing where the guy kept sneaking out of the city after when the girls weren't looking, and then the girls would be like, no, you can't leave, you can't do that, bad boy. Yeah, like the fighting sequences are okay, and like the humor, like I see the vision. Like, again, if I was 15, I'd probably be laughing a lot more. Like, it's like just above the bare minimum. Just above the bare minimum. I'm already losing my shit. But yeah, it does some things that are like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, I don't think. I think it probably teased the nerd guy a little ahead of time, but I wasn't paying attention. And I think like him having all the lowest level spells and like trying to figure out how to use them, it's like sensible stuff, and like you see it come to a head when he fights the rogue nerd. But yeah, there's some like interesting components to this, sort of. I wouldn't say interesting, like approaching interesting, right? Like almost. And like the president girl, who's like supposed to be like the secondary main character, she's like a complete one-dimensional character. Like, she doesn't do anything, and like all the girls are nothing, and like even the dudes, there's too many, like all the trying to play in all the classmates just make them all seem less important. And even the skeleton girl, who eventually becomes a real girl because of the power of love or whatever, she doesn't really do anything in the span of the however many episodes she's in, so she doesn't really feel all that important. But she's there, and she like does something, I guess. She like helps fight or whatever, and she like puts a stop to the stampede or whatever the fuck it is. I don't know. It sure was an isekai. This is one of the isekais of all time. All right. The healer who was banished from his party is, in fact, the strongest. This is just competent. I think it's a completely fine fantasy show. It's completely inoffensive. It does things that make sense, and I'm like, yeah, all right. I come out of it and I'm like, you didn't offend me. You didn't really get me invested, but I'm like, you know what? Everything you did, I get it. That made sense to me. And, it's because it's not like the characters are like that. I think the protagonist is a nothing burger, but a lot of the other characters are at least have enough personality to make me be like, yeah, okay, I don't want you to die. The world building, like, it's consistent. They're like consistent rules. Like, the characters are competently written, and like the story builds in a way that generally makes sense, and like it just never graduates from competent to compelling, right? Like, it just awkwardly stays at like very sensible, like foundationally sensible, and behaves itself. It like sits there and behaves itself like me in the corner of every college house party I went to. It sits there and never does anything interesting. I think like there's enough characters, and a lot of them like, you know, help kind of build the world and help, you know, kind of add to the character dynamic, but there's not too many that it's overwhelming, and there's a lot of different like kind of subplots that happen, but they help like build the world and stuff, and like the characters and their backstories and all that. The romance in this show is not very good, so like the way it kind of connects those characters, like a lot of there's the main romance, there's romance between the main two, which isn't really that good, and there's the romance between like the knight and the other girl. Was she a healer or whatever? I forget. There's that romance, and that was also not good. But like, and the protagonist, oh god, the protagonist is not good at all. I don't really like him. I don't have a reason to really care about that guy. Yeah, and speaking of the romance, it never resolves. Like, I don't think it ever, like, I think one of them, the blondie, confesses to the knight guy and doesn't really get an answer, and Narcena doesn't do anything either. Like, that remains unresolved. So why even bother with the romance? Oh, it could have just been like, oh, I have a crush on him, but I'll tell him one day. I almost think that would have been better. There's a weird caveat to everything where it's like the main guy sometimes is like a demon or whatever. He like turns into a fucking guy with red eyes or black eyes or whatever. It doesn't really get explained. He's just kind of there. Like, why is he a demon? He's just a dude. And then sometimes he goes ultra nightmare mode when he gets pissed off when fighting a dragon or whatever, or a hydra. Like, sometimes he just turns into ultra nightmare mode and goes fucking Insano style. Like, it doesn't really make sense because it never gets explained why that even happens in the first place. So, and it doesn't get resolved either. Like, he never like takes control of that his anger, and it just, it doesn't do anything. It's just there. I don't know why, but it's there. Even besides the main character, like the other characters are like uninspiring. They play into the story fine. Like, at least they're there for a reason, and you know, there's not too many characters that they start taking up space, but like, it's just like, even the main girl, who's kind of like the driving force behind, at least especially the initial plot, she just is kind of like whatever. Like, I think there's enough here to get someone invested, but like, it's just whatever. Like, I'm not sure what it could have done better really, but like, it just felt completely unremarkable. Like, I think if they had built the characters a little bit better and like gave me more of a reason to care about them, I think this would have been more enjoyable. But it was fine. Like, it was competent, and like, but that's not, like, at some point competent just becomes boring, you know? Alright, the do-over damsel conquers the dragon emperor. This one isn't bad. I really like the main girl here. Again, I really like the main girl. She's got just the right mix of independence and fighting ability, like, or just like, you know, like, she's independent, you know, very independent, while also like doing the right amount of swooning for the main guy, and she's also very, you know, a very competent fighter. So I think, so she's got that right balance, so it never feels like too necessarily out of place when she's like swooning for the main guy, because like she does a lot of fighting and leading military troops and shit. So like, it makes sense that in her moments of vulnerability, she like wants to, you know, be comforted by someone she trusts. So in that sense, the romance is pretty good here. I think it's, maybe not pretty good, but like, it's fine. Like, I'm not offended in any way really by it. And you know, the main girl, she's witty, she's intelligent, and then like she's also got the little silly gimmick of where she likes food a lot, and she can get immediately won over when someone cooks her something. So it's like, she's really good. She's got like, you know, the thing that kind of makes her a little silly, and like, but while still being a sort of someone you want to root for. I think she's really competently built, like, very, like, in that sense, she's a good basis for everything, right, to build the show on. But like, other than that, she never really, like, you know, we've seen a lot of these like do-over, new timeline sort of shoujo happen in recent seasons. She, in contrast, the main girl here, she never really like loses her mind and is able to adjust and kind of realizes her situation pretty quickly and is able to like flip that switch where she's like, all right, here's what I know I should do. And she, you know, when her new timeline doesn't necessarily follow her old one, like even as the story progresses and she's, you know, things are starting to change and they're not going exactly as she knows them. She doesn't really ever lose her composure, and she's able to adjust pretty well and adapt. So that's cool. A cool thing about her too. And she also, like, you know, she's, like I said, she's one of those characters you want to root for. Like, she has the drive, she has motivations to do what she's doing, and like the whole I will protect you, I never go back on my word, that's my ninja way, and you know, that whole nonsense. It helps us understand her better and appreciate her motivations and her ambitions, right? As far as the Dragon Emperor goes, I think he's a fine character. Again, inoffensive. I don't really understand what exactly made him the Dragon Emperor in the first place. Or the dragon, he is the dragon, or is the Dragon Emperor the actual small little dragon dude? I forget. But his character doesn't really feel all that consistent to me. I think we needed to see more of what he was actually like in the previous timeline so that it could contrast with how he is now and how we see him now as the viewer, and how the main girl sees him now, and like where he's like cooking and being a goofball. We didn't really see, we just saw like kind of fucking flash like images of PNGs of him in the previous timeline, so we don't really have a sense for like how much different he is now in the new timeline. So it doesn't really quite work in that sense. So and also like when he snaps just randomly, like when he gets angry, he like flips on a dime and it doesn't quite feel right. And even as far as supporting characters go, like they don't take away from anything. I'm completely, you know, they're more like, I don't want you to die, like you don't offend me in any way, and I'm like, you add to what's going on here, you're there for a reason, and I don't want to throw you off screen every time you're taking up space. Like, the supporting characters are fine as well, and like and again, I even like some of them for what they are. Like the twins, they're not twins, but like the two little warriors, the guy and the girl warrior that are introduced pretty early on, they come to mind. I like them. And the soldier boy and girl, fuck, I don't know what's going on. And like the plot is all right, like the way it builds on itself is fine, generally makes sense, and a lot of it comes full circle with the big twist at the end, so that's nice. And I think the ending is pretty good. The big twist at the end being the sister. I had to clarify that for myself because I forgot. But yeah, the ending's fine. Like, I think this one's pretty solid for what it is. The sister thing caught me off guard. I'm like, whoa, hey now, let's calm down. But yeah, it's a little. Some of it's a little like there's a lot happening, so it's kind of tough to keep track of it all sometimes. But like, I think for what it is, it does a pretty good job. All right, Nina the Starry Bride. This is another one carried by the main girl. I like Nina a lot, I think, at least for what she is, and like, because not a lot of the other characters are particularly compelling or interesting. And this is one of those shoujo where I'm like, I see what they're going for here, but the romance feels like it escalates so. Like, this is one of those shoujo where like I see what they're going for, but the romance it evolves too quickly. It goes from like it escalates from like, wow, what a great guy, to this is my soulmate in a matter of like a full episode. It goes from at the beginning of episode and then at the end he's like, this is my soulmate. Like, it kind of evolves way too fast for my liking. It doesn't really make sense. And then the introduction of another primary love interest is really off-putting at first. You get used to it as it goes on, but like it's fine. Like, it's weird. It feels weird initially, and then you kind of see as the story develops, I don't know, it sort of makes sense. And like Nina's attachment to both of her crushes, it's like it's sensible. A lot of the plot like weirdly centers around Nina in times that maybe it shouldn't, because we don't really know what the deal was with like why potentially the princess who she's replacing was important, or so important, and other than that she was a bargaining chip to use as like, you know, to get her to marry her off somewhere. But you know, like Nina's like drive, her determination, her like unwavering you know, confidence in her character, like it's, you know, she's happy with who she is, like that makes you want to root for her, right? Like she's very like uncompromising in her personality, and it's nice. So it's really good contrast with pretty much everybody else in this show. Like, the settings and world building are fine. Like, again, this is another one that's just fine. I don't think the romance is particularly good. When shoujo have a love triangle like this, it doesn't really work for me. especially because a lot of the romance almost feels unnatural. I don't think it's bad, but it's just, yeah. And it leaves on kind of a weird cliffhanger. Like, the last episode leaves on a weird cliffhanger. So, I don't know. It's not. I don't think it's good as some of the other shoujo I've even already covered in this roundup. But it's fine. Like, I think it's fine. I guess. All right, Goodbye Dragon Life. This is the newest member of the Overpowered Fantasy, where they do some random shit for a while. It's not really connected to any overarching narrative club, but I think this one was pretty good for that category. It's got like it's got a pretty clear message that it wants to send, and but with the main guy who used to be a dragon finally finding purpose and being with the folks of the village, and he's in the family like bond that they have, and since he had no friends when he was a dragon, sitting atop the mountain as like the final boss or whatever, and now he's in human, has friends, and he's like, I'll fight for my family and friends and shit. And even like the other main characters, like the Lamia girl and the swordswoman, were fine. Like, I didn't think they had a purpose and they were there for a reason. Like, I think the writing was, passable, and even some of the fighting sequences were okay. Like, not bad at all. And the swordswoman and the Lamia girl, they develop over the course of it, and like former dragon guy is like, you see the whole fucking fight for protect his village and all this garbage, and yeah, it's fine. Even there's a lot of other characters too, and like the world building is fine. It's pretty good for what it is, but it never really graduates to properly compelling. And I actually think the arc that it has, like the sort of drawn out arc towards the end, I think it lasts until the final episode. It is pretty good for what it is. Like, I think it's as close to compelling as the show gets. Again, for what it is, I think it does everything really sensibly. So, like, it has characters that mean something, and a lot of the sort of plot is fine, and like builds upon the world building in a way that makes sense. And yeah, I think it's fine. I'm not at all offended by this one, and I think it has enough to the point where you could have a good time watching it. It is enjoyable. How's that? All right, negative positive angler. It's not bad. I think it's pretty much a run-of-the-mill show where they're like, reality sucks sometimes, but you can take your happiness into your own hands by choosing who you spend time with and what you do with your time in your limited amount of time in this corporeal realm. Except this one's about fishing. I think the main guy is like fine. Like, there's a lot of ups and downs and his feelings, and big roller coaster ride of like him going through his daily life and shit, and like trying to figure this whole life thing out. Like, yeah, like I think he's very much relatable in some ways, but he's also like taken to an extreme where he's like constantly making bad decisions, even though like whether or not he can help it or whatever. Like, it's not like he's trying, especially in the beginning, it's not like he's trying not to make bad decisions. He's just kind of doing what he is like habitual or whatever. But he grows as a person. You see every like step of the way he does that as he like interacts with all these other colorful characters, and quirky characters is the right word. Quirky characters. These various quirky characters, and eventually becomes a regular at Bass Pro Shops and the whole 9 yards, right? So it's fine. And like the main thing, when it eventually comes to a head, is like the relationship between the main guy and the guy who dyed his hair, the guy who he's living with. And there's backstory there, and it like generally makes sense because like I think the dude's brother died or some shit like that. Their fight makes sense, the way they make up makes sense, it's pertinent to their character arcs and that kind of stuff. It's fine. Like, again, this is sensible, and it's like gonna hit you in the feels in some spots, and it's like, yeah, that's what we got out of this one, and I don't really find any of the other characters particularly interesting, but they're not bad. And again, they're like sort of there to like help the main guy, just help like surround the main guy with these quirky personalities. So and help teach him about fishing, I guess. Yeah, like, well, by them forming relationships with the main guy, it's just helpful. Like, obviously the most notable is that one girl, Ifido's girl, whose name I can't remember. This one is definitely not trying to be super compelling or anything, right? Like, the quirky personalities are fun. They combine to make a fun little dynamic. And, it's not like there was, especially before the final arc where the main two have a fight, like, it's not like that guy's character was any deeper than he's a nice guy who likes to fish. And then it's not like he had more to his character than that, really. And it's not like that girl ever really develops past that. She's just really good at fishing or whatever. And like the sense of humor is fine, and like it has decent pacing, and like it sometimes does give focus to like some of the supporting characters. So it has like a nice little it's very like rounded out in that way. So it never like spends too long on one thing, like focuses on in spots where it probably shouldn't, like helps work on the characters a little bit and help us understand them more. So it's not bad. It's just sort of, it's not especially great or interesting. It's one of those shows that's like very human and down to earth, and like, not everyone's perfect and we're gonna fight from time to time, and that's just how humanity is, and human experience type shit. A lot of it can be uncomfortable to watch sometimes, but it's one of those where it's like, yeah, it's reality, man. Sometimes life sucks and you gotta suck it up, and that's what I did watching this show about fishing. I sucked it up and I watched it. But yeah, it's fine. All right, TsumaSho. My wife became an elementary schooler. Unfortunately, this was pretty good. This is another one that hits you in the feels. This one definitely hits you more in the human feels than the last one, the angler one, because it's about life and death, and the meaning, and like how much meaning you give life, and how our time is so limited, and like how spending how our time with family is so important, and all this. It very much plays on the human experience, where we're, I'm sure just about everybody's lost a relative at some point. Really plays on a lot of that, and like, growing as people, and like living the life that your past relative would have wanted for you, and struggling with depression because of losing a relative, and like all that kind of stuff. It really plays on that in a way that is realistic, and move the characters forward eventually when the wife is reintroduced as taking over the body of an elementary schooler. And another thing, like with it's revealed the wife had sort of inhabited the body of an elementary school girl. That girl's mom, who was abusive, and her character arc of learning, like properly coming to terms with herself, and like getting over her struggles, and learning not to take it out on her daughter, and like how to be a more loving mother. Like that arc didn't necessarily need to be there, but it certainly helps add to what's going on, and like makes everything much more sensible and well-rounded. So that makes sense. I think the romance between the daughter and the guy who fishes is like weird but fine. It's an arc that makes sense for her, right? Like, because obviously before the mom officially fucking left us this corporeal realm, she would have wanted to see her daughter become happy, and like, I guess when you're in Japan and you have a declining birth rate, you might as well get married to a dude. So again, it's very sensibly done, and it plays on your emotions in a way that is very human, and it really hits you in the pathos, right? So yeah, just really well done, and like hits you all in all the right emotional spots, and like if you were more susceptible to that kind of thing than me, you definitely come away from the last episode with tears in your eyes, because it is properly it is very emotional. So it is weird, right? It sounds weird, but the way they actually do it, it's really not. So I think this one's good for what it is. It sounds weird, but it is it definitely is one of those emotional rides that will get pretty much anyone with feelings in the feels, right? So fair enough. 2 cores, you know what that means. 2.5 Dimensional Seduction. God, I'm so happy to have this. Oh, I'm so happy to have this. Would you believe it? This shit fucking rules. There's a lot I could say about this, right? Like, this is like an OG recommendation of mine coming to fruition in the form of an anime. Fucking so excited that this is real. So there's a lot I could say about this. Things like how I love the characters and think they're immediately really likable and even some relatable in some cases. And for they're immediately likable for how passionate and earnest they are when it comes to the things that they like and what's important to them, including characters that get introduced later on, like Noah and Arya. Or the fact that this is another one of those anime that's like a shonen in disguise, right? Because the way it's structured is a lot like shonen, because the characters they're like story arcs, right? Where the characters are presented with new and different challenges to overcome. And when they find the answers and how they're going to overcome those challenges, it's incredibly satisfying and rewarding to see them grow as characters. And, they all overcome it using the power of teamwork and the power of love or whatever. It's satisfying to see them do that because it makes sense, and it builds off of what they had done before, and everything that built up to this point and everything they learned so far. There's even training arcs basically in this, sort of. So there's a lot I could say that I really love about this show. But speaking of love, I think fundamentally this show is about love and the forms that it takes. Specifically, in this case, for people who genuinely love works of fiction and the characters that come with them, right? It explores different ways people engage and feel things through works of fiction and express the emotions they feel and associate with those works of fiction through their cosplay. So just to throw out some examples, it explores different types of love between people, like familial love, like with Arya's case, romantic love, like with Mikari's case, or friendly love, like with Nonoa's case. And it also puts heavy emphasis on how the way people express their love can affect others in a variety of ways, right? Like Nagomi bouncing back by competing with Lilisa at that convention they were at, and Arya's dad finding motivation to create manga again are both great examples of that. Okumura expressing his love to Arya's dad, single-handedly rejuvenated his creative passion, right? And even rejuvenated to an extent, helped spark the rejuvenation of his relationship with Arya's mom. So there's a lot of variety of ways love is expressed by different characters and for different reasons. Whether it's Nagomi crushing on that one underappreciated guy in her gacha game or whatever, or whether it's Lily-san Okumura going absolutely insano style over, Liliel manga or scenes in her anime and shit. It's just, I think it's incredibly charming just because, if for nothing else, then for how passionate and how earnest they are about what they love to do, right? They're exactly as otakus should be. Otakus, that's just a word, right? That's just a sort of umbrella term to include nerdy, geeky folks. They're model otakus in that sense, because they don't force what they think on others, right? They just are passionate about what they love and want to share it with others. And in addition to all that, this legitimately explores a lot of human emotion and the human experience in modern society through cosplay, interpersonal relationships, like with people you admire or with people within your own family, and how they can be affected by social media and the effect it can have on your career and your mental health. Nagomi comes to mind. I think Nagomi is one of the dark horse like one of the dark horses for surprisingly compelling characters in this, because like her backstory just completely makes sense given her career choice, and like the way she eventually overcomes that through like rekindling her earnest passion for cosplay. It just works really well for her. And you know, even if for some reason you're someone who watches this kind of thing specifically for the fan service, you won't even be disappointed in that aspect either. Yay, I guess. Because the author is obviously just a massive, genuine otaku, he knows exactly how to nail all the sweet spots of fan service without ever going too far with it. Like, in the first few episodes, he does push the boundaries, sure, but not that often, really, especially later on. And there are plenty of scenes that are just really sweet and heartwarming to watch, even within those first few episodes. Again, I mentioned how this is sort of structured like a shonen in disguise. This might be a weird comparison, but this show, I would almost compare it to Food Wars, something like Food Wars. Fundamentally, this show is about something that most people don't put too much thought into. It's just something that you might see or do offhandedly for fun, that being cosplay in this case. But upon seeing other people's way of expressing themselves and who they are through that creative medium, it affects other people's outlook, not just on the medium itself, but also on parts of their own lives and how to even better themselves. Like they'll see these characters expressing themselves passionately through cosplay, and that helps them. It reminds them what they truly love to do, and like they'll find the drive to start looking to discover what it is they truly love. And there's a lot of fan service too, so that's cool. Anyway, no amount of my rambling will do this show justice. It's a show written by a nerd for nerds, so if you're a nerd, watch this show. I promise you won't regret it. Tasuketsu, Fate of the Majority. Boy, oh boy, do I have things to say about this one. This is like if the word contrived became a show. I feel like this is trying to introduce younger kids to the world of like really complex game anime. Like even the main character and then his eventual successor look like they're right out of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Beyblade or some shit. So this is one of the less popular ones I'm covering, so I'm gonna like introduce this. So basically, like one day, everyone on the computer screen saw like some message pop up, and it was like a poll, and it was like, do you live in X place, or like, are you asleep or some shit? I can't remember what it was initially, but essentially one night everyone who was asleep kicks the bucket. So you're left with like a very small number of folks left, and they have to deal with this crazy emperor on the loose who's like trying to kill people through Reddit polls. But then eventually it turns into this crazy complex game, like complex for no reason, game where you can like submit Reddit poll questions through red laptops scattered throughout Tokyo or whatever, and like there's research facility subjects on the loose who can use supernatural powers for some reason. When they look at a paper funny, they give it the stink eye and they get a supernatural power for it by giving up their kidneys or their liver or whatever, or their leg. But just like a bunch of information gets absolutely fucking dumped on you, like slime at a Nickelodeon awards show, and it's really hard to digest all at once. It doesn't really work, and it doesn't fester at all, and that's the whole show. Everything in this show moves way too fast. It tries to do too many things in not a lot of time, and makes everything it does do have less meaning and weight to it than it should. It jams what probably should be pivotal character moments into random episodes like their fan service scenes in a harem anime. Episode 1 or 2, we find out that the teacher of like the class they were in the very first scene was actually plotting to ensure his own safety at the expense of his students who were still alive. But then by episode 6, he's turned over a new 4 episodes later, he's turned over a new leaf completely and reconciles with the main group after not a lot of time. Like, he was trying to kill off his students. Everyone's like, you're a bad guy. He like flees the scene. 4 episodes later, he's like, actually, I was wrong. Please welcome me back to your group, otherwise we're fucked. And the main guys are like, yeah, okay. And then another example, in that same episode 6, maybe 7, there's this moment where all the supporting main characters express their faith in the main character, who's basically done a grand total of like 2 important things by this point, because there's so many other things happening outside of their main group, like moving parts, and we see it all happen in the episodes. Plus, the main group was constantly being split up to do random shit in the span of those episodes, so we just barely see the main character do anything. So we don't really feel like he's earned all of their undying trust, their unconditional trust, like they were expressing to him in episode 7. And when you're watching it, it is a goddamn nightmare, because it's essentially split into 2 halves. And the first half should probably be like 20 episodes. Instead, it's like 9 or 10. So like, we see the main character and his little love interest face off against who we think is the ultimate baddie in like episode 10 after not a lot of actual proper build-up. So feels like there's no emotional or storytelling weight to it at all. And the big baddie they fight in episode 10, they infiltrate his tower with the most basic scheme imaginable, cut the power, and turn off his security by force, and they just walk right in. The Emperor's a little boy, and he's like, fight me, I'll use my power of Reddit polls to kill you off. And then they use this fucking overly complex plan where one guy spins the laptop to look at him, and they flash up a you are already dead sign. The guy fucking died, the little kid fucking dies. And then this whole other plot starts in episode 11. It's fucking crazy. It just comes out of nowhere, some random kid. And it's in the moment, it's like, what the fuck? What is this? What is happening? Because, by the way, the main character's love interests are basically dead. For all we know, they're basically dead after that. After their little conflict, because they got Reddit polled. They voted the majority and they're fucking dead or whatever. It's stupid. And even besides that, so like their infiltration plan to the Emperor goes exactly according to plan. Even their plan to kill him goes exactly according to plan. Exactly as they planned it out, which is breaking like storytelling 101 rules, where like you can't have them develop a plan that goes exactly as they think it is. That's just fucking boring. Like there's no excitement to that at all, even though we don't know the plan as the viewers, because they just skip over and they're like, here's the plan, next scene, all right, so that's the plan, what do we think? And they're like, yeah, okay, and it goes exactly, but that's still fucking boring. Even besides that, when they're formulating the plan, don't even get me started about how some guy who we thought was dead but comes back in the second half for some reason. This guy who got killed off, fucking stabbed, turns out he had been researching the rules of the game and the world in like the fucking 72 hours the game had been going on, and has all kinds of super useful information, like any information they might potentially need where there's like a hole in their knowledge. Turns out the guy who died wrote it down in a notebook somewhere, and so when the teacher who like reconciles with the group after not a long time of being evil brings those notes up to the group, he's like, oh, like, what's this? We're missing this information. Like, oh, don't worry, we've got it right here, very conveniently. It's completely contrived. It doesn't do anything satisfying at all. Like, no, it doesn't feel like they earn it. Like, it doesn't, like, the main character is just a nobody. He's just some dude. Which feels stupid when you're watching it. And, like, even the addition of the secondary, like, the successor protagonist, it's easy to look back on it after it's done and be like, oh wow, it all kind of fits together in a weird way. And like in that sense, it's fine. Like when you finish the whole thing and look back on it, it's like, oh, I see how everything is supposed to fit together. But in the moment, it's bewildering. Like every twist and turn in this story is baffling. Like, because it doesn't feel like it built on anything, because we don't care about any of the characters. None of the characters are given time to fester at all. Like, we don't care about any of them. They could be easily replaceable by any schmuck. Like, who cares about any of the characters? They don't mean anything. Other than that, they may or may not own an important superpower that might be relevant to their plot. Who cares? Even besides the story that takes bewildering turns, any and all semblances of romance in this show are dog shit. The characters are fucking worthless. They could be anybody who has half a brain or is like slightly witty and like able to think on their feet and adaptable. But just because the plot gets just fucking vomited at you at light speed, it makes nothing feel important. So there's no weight to anything that happens. And even at the very end, like the most compelling thing I think is the angle of the Ryan, however you want to say it, befriending the Emperor. Like, he was originally, it's supposed to be an infiltration mission. Turns out he's like wants to be the Emperor's friend, Haruto. He wants to be his friend, and so in a sense, Ryan betrays both sides to do his own thing and make sure that the Emperor stays alive and all this stuff. And like, that's the most compelling emotional angle of the whole show. And that's done pretty well, I think. And it's easy to look back and be like, oh, so the Ryan's purpose was to befriend the Emperor, and like, but when he's first introduced, like, who the hell are you and why are you here? Like, it's so baffling. And you know, Maria as an antagonist is fine. Like, it would be more acceptable if the show previously had played with themes of like familial love or whatever, but it didn't. It was just Maria was some girl who like really loved her brothers, and that was, or she loves her. She's still alive, but like, you know, she was some girl who really loves her brothers and like she like had access to all of the superpowers. And like, also they just casually drop at one point that the way the superpowers might have manifested on Earth is through the use of like a fucking ghost or something. They might have manifested it through some other dimension. They just casually drop that. They never address it later. And I think it was like because there was this cube that can contact God or something, is basically like a direct line to Jesus Christ, and that's how like and that's how they gained the rights or whatever. My god, it's a mess. And like, you know, and that machine, that cube, is introduced like at the end of like episode 21 out of 24, and is used a grand total of like once after that. So nothing is given time. Like, it does so many things and nothing is given enough time. Like, again, this is another one of those things, like, it gives us no reason to care about the characters other than they are the ones who are thrown into this weird nightmare of a situation. That's the only reason we have to care about these characters. They basically have the most bare minimum personalities aside from that. And I did like get invested. Again, the second half I think is a lot more competent than the first. I think the first, because it's the first half like sets up everything, and we think that's going to be like, you know, the Emperor is the ultimate big baddie, but then turns out there's a mastermind after that. Like, the Queen Maria ends up being the ultimate bad guy, the de facto ultimate bad guy. So it sets that up, and then just completely flounders, and like it knocks everything down in a way that makes everything feel so unimportant. But then the second half takes a little more time to work with everything. And I think like it has moments where I'm like, oh yeah, like I see the vision, or like, you know, what you're doing completely makes sense given your situation. Like, I agree with your plan here. Like, it has moments where I'm like invested, and I'm like, okay, yes, I see what you're going for. I agree. Like, this is the right call. And even conceptually, like, you know, having free reign over a big city, you know, where basically lawless Tokyo, right, to use whatever materials to what you want, and with a complex game going on, a dangerous complex game where you're constantly risking your life, and there's superpowers on the loose. It's conceptually, in an idea, that sounds cool, but a lot of the actual story just completely falls flat. But don't even get me started about how, like, the student council president is literally a walking deus ex machina. He's just, like, randomly granted the right to suspend time. He just... makes a lot of what happened, like, basically irrelevant. Like, he just fucking... it saves a lot of people from dying, potentially dying. And like again, there's like a lot of moving parts here. They're like trying to adapt and like figure out what the best course of action is depending on their situation in any given scenario. And like a lot of the twists and turns even are like kind of interesting on paper. God, it's a mess. I like again, I saw there were moments where I'm like, I see the vision. It just needed more time to let it faster. I'm like, it's just bewildering. Like, this I could see being like a multi-season Netflix thing. You know, like this should have been like, give it like 36 episodes instead of 24. It was, and it's not like it ever consistently focuses on any like specific themes throughout, like the familial love stuff. Like it doesn't focus on any themes to like deliver a message. It's just a weird excuse for a contrived storyline and a power of friendship takeaway. All right, Sword Art Online Alternative Season 2. Yeah. If you came back for Season 2, yay, you got what you wanted. I don't particularly care for Sword Art Online Alternative. I think it's I think it was conceptually, right? Like on paper, it would be a cool idea to explore GGO more, right? Because GGO left, especially in the main SAO storyline, it left a lot of potential there. There's a lot of like untapped potential. So having a spin-off where they featuring other characters in GGO makes complete sense, and like it's certainly fitting for the world of SAO, but it doesn't really build any like significant plot, right? Like it's the most plot it does get are like the battles. What are they even fucking called? The jamborees? God, I don't remember. But the big gun battle royale jamborees, #1 victory royale Fortnite battles or whatever. Those are like the most significant things that happen, and really like a lot of it comes down to like GGO being a thrill, you know, like a weird thrill for both like Len and Pito, right? It kind of like, and I think like some of the twists and turns in like the third jamboree or whatever the fuck it was that happened in the first half are like relatively interesting, and I think like the face off between Len and Pito was good for what it was, and like the weird final thing where like the Len, you know, as the little girl was like fighting some actual United States soldiers and shit, and the guy came out traumatized, and like it was weird, but I guess it shows the effect GGO can have on people with how realistic it is or whatever. It doesn't build a really narratively or emotionally compelling plot like the main SAO does, but for what it is, it's like if you're looking for a little extra on GGO with like some new characters that are fine. I like the secondary girl, the not like Len's friend. I think she's funny. And even the squad of gymnastic girls who turn into are they gymnastics girls who turn into like the big buff soldiers in the game? Like there's some kind of funny ideas here, and like the characters are like acceptable. It doesn't really do it for me though. It's fine though. Like it's again, this one's passable. It's a good. I think it's like as far as a continuation from season 1 goes, it makes sense. So, all right. As a reincarnated aristocrat, I'll use my appraisal skill to rise in the world season 2. Again, this is really sensible, I think. Builds off of what last season did and like the gathering of talented folks in talent who are talented in various ways, and you know it actually brings them into conflicts where they can use those abilities. They go off the main guy and his squad go off to war and all that. From like episode 3 or 4 on, they go to war or whatever. It's just, I think it's just like a fun little watch, right? Like even though it's supposed to be war, a lot of what we actually see in this season isn't necessarily warlike. Like there's even like one of the example that comes to mind is like there's a hostage situation at an enemy tower, right, where like some guy's wife is being held captive there, and a bunch of other people's wives, a bunch of other women are being held captive there, and the main kid is able to negotiate their assistants, like the guy's, the guy whose wife it is that's kidnapped, assistants, and his army's assistants on their side in exchange for not just fucking exploding where they're being held captive and, being able to rescue them. And that's like a thing that happens over the course of like 2 episodes, maybe 3. So that whole plot is executed. So it's not just like them going to war. There's a lot of like things that may be included in war, but it's like, so it's not like just seeing them go to war or whatever. There's a lot of like, thinking and strategy involved, and like stuff that is characteristic of war, but isn't just like a bunch of dudes fighting each other necessarily all the time. Like there is that, but it's a little more complex than that, which I appreciate. So it just makes it more interesting to watch episode to episode, right? And even like the new characters that get added are nice additions, and the way like the character dynamic of all the characters that were already there is still nice. It doesn't really get stale or anything, and the plot, the pacing is nice. They just keep it moving at a fairly steady pace. It's just fun to watch. So what else can you really ask for, right? Like I think it's just a good, pleasant little watch. Like there is some emotional weight to what's happening, and you want to see the main character succeed, and like there's some even development like with the shadow guy or whatever he is, like the guy who was previously a mercenary but then later swears loyalty to ours or whatever his name is. Just a kind of surprising, little watch. I was surprised to see this get season 2, and then now even season 3 announced so quickly after the first season. But it's just it's a fairly enjoyable watch for what it is, even compelling almost, I would argue. So definitely not bad at all. All right, MF Ghost season 2. I got invested in the race, not really as much in the romance, but the racing I'm kind of like, ooh, because the bro's car finally got upgraded. The 86 or whatever finally got an engine upgrade, and we're like, ooh, now he can finally take those turns like he should or whatever, and he can catch up on the straightaways. You mean he upgraded for like 200 horsepower to like 250 or whatever, or like maybe 300 or some shit? But it doesn't matter. Bro's getting upgrades. That's what matters. I accidentally got invested in this one. Yeah, the romance still isn't really that good, but the racing is fun. Like it kind of flies by. The whole episodes kind of fly by of this one. But handsome British guy and half Japanese fella and Ren, they're like fine characters, and like, or Kanata, there we go, I remembered his name. They're completely fine. Like they're just, the romance is, it's not great. It's not bad, but it's just kind of like whatever. Like, she's kind of more infatuated with Kanata than anything, it feels like. But Kanata is just so earnest that I think he kind of helps make it work. A lot of the angel stuff kind of makes me uncomfortable, but the racing, I'm kind of into it. I'm not gonna lie. So this one getting a season 3 announced too, I'm kind of hype about. So, like, okay, like angel stuff, like race girls are necessary. Of age ones, though. Of age race girls. A lot of episodes are just them driving cars and shit. A lot, again, it builds the world in a way that makes sense. It's never too overwhelming or anything. Like, there's a lot of moving parts that kind of like pique your interest, but never really feel like they're overwhelming you. So yeah, fine, whatever. They drive cars fast. It's cool. Yay. All right, Ron Kamonohashi's Forbidden Deductions, season 2. This is definitely a step up from season 1, in my opinion, and mostly because it has an actual lingering through line. Like, it all feels like it's connected to something now. And one of the things I realized while watching this is I think I know there are a subset of fans, of just media enjoyers in general. So basically all people who just like crime shows. They don't necessarily want to solve the mystery themselves, but they like to see see everything unfold and eventually get solved. It's like a thrill almost, right? So there is there is that appeal that I don't think I gave enough credit to in season 1, because I think season 1 did have that crime solving appeal, right? And this season has it as well. But what this one has also is it's all connected back to the House of Moriarty. The House of Moriarty. So it's all like the House of Moriarty is now trying to provoke Ron at this point, right? So by like essentially forcing these cases on him, and you know, it all sort of develops. It's a slow burn development, obviously, because even by the end of the season, we're kind of still not really that much further than we were at the beginning of this season. But at least we like have some character development on Ron's part, because like we learned that his dad was I don't know if he was the leader, but Ron's dad was like somebody connected to the House of Moriarty, and he like taught Ron a bunch while Ron was young. That being why Ron is able to understand the minds of criminals so easily. In that sense is good. And I think a lot of the cases, the scene overall, I think that even the cases, even the ones that don't connect back to the Moriarty house, are a step up, in my opinion, from season 1. Like, I think they're just generally more sensibly done and like more compelling, I guess. Not all of them. Some of maybe there's like a dud here. Like the beach one is kind of weird in my opinion, but it has that crime solving appeal, definitely. And now that it's like sort of building the story a little bit more, even though it's very slowly doing it, it does feel like now there is an end game in mind, right? It didn't really have that in season 1. So for what it is, it's definitely enjoyable, and I like the dynamic between the main two. I think it's a good dynamic. And one thing it absolutely needed to have, that it did have at least sort of in this season, was a moment where Toto acted on his own accord to solve a mystery, right? Because he'd been basically entirely depending on Ron for every case before the final one of this season. And finally, when Ron was like really like doing some self-reflection, Toto had to step up and be like, all right, I'm gonna investigate, I'm gonna put the pieces together, and I'm gonna solve this damn mystery. So that was a good moment. And it didn't really, you know, Ron ended up coming back and doing a lot of the bulk of it later on, but like Toto did have that moment for his character where he was like, all right, Ron can't help me right now, I've got to do this. Like, there's still an ongoing murders happening, I've got to take action here, and he did do that. So that was a good moment for him. That needed to happen. So basically, that checked all the boxes for season 2. So fuck it, it was all right. I thought it was pretty good for what it is. Definitely enjoyable. So good crime solving little thing happening here for sure. All right, Demon Lord retries season 2. This is boring. Season 1 was better, but I don't know by how much. Because this whole show was just whatever. I already I don't feel like I should have to explain, but I have an inherent problem where you have a middle-aged dude just like making a bunch of teenagers fall in love with him, even if he's not trying to. Even if that's not his goal, right? It's just a weird thing that happens. I don't really like it. Also, a lot of the characters that were in season 1 are just not here anymore. It's one of those where the main guy just sort of travels around and gets introduced to different characters, whether by choice or not, like various characters throughout the world, which are supposed to like help with the world building, I feel like, but they're just sort of nothing characters in the end. And even like the characters that do get introduced this season, like that one Dark Knight guy's daughter, she's boring. Her end game was, oh, I have a crush on the Demon Lord now. What is it? The Tsundere princess or whatever, pink-haired princess? Boring. She did nothing. Her end game was, now I have a crush on the Demon Lord, on the 40-something Demon Lord. Weird as shit. I think she did have like a backstory with some other demi-human girl, which was something, I guess. At least it wasn't nothing. Some girl he yoinked from Japan, from his original world. At least she had a personality, but she didn't do anything really. And I've mentioned this before in previous roundups, but when you have an overpowered main character, it makes everything it makes me not care about anything that happens, because there's no drama ever. He just is able to take care of any problem he faces like it's nothing, and so if he doesn't care, why should I? This one is another that just doesn't do anything for me. Honestly, the art, I think this was by a different studio than the previous season, and it looks kind of like ass. So, alright, Seirei Gensouki, Spirit Chronicles Season 2. This is, again, another one. Overpowered MC, wanders around the world, does things, has a bunch of women fall in love with him. At least he's underage. And the other characters are also underage, specifically. I don't know why they felt the need to bring in new, isekai, more people from Japan. Also people who were apparently involved in the main character's life previously when he was in Japan. But that never gets resolved. Like, they never actually learned that he was in their past or whatever. Like the little sister girl was apparently previously his little sister, but she got changed to different families, and that never gets resolved either way. So fuck it doesn't even matter apparently. This main character is completely fucking boring. Like, he does nothing. Like, why do he's completely personalityless. He's just the most default fucking main character of all time. He's just handsome and powerful. Those are his personality traits. At least what happens, it like makes me want to root for the main character. At least, like, it makes me want to root for him, and like so that he's okay and like gets back to what he was doing before, which I guess is fine. But it just lacks any punch. It lacks any emotional weight. It lacks any plot storytelling weight. The only mildly interesting thing that happens is like he's able to reunite with the princess, the purple-haired princess, who was in season 1, and he kind of like who wanted to apologize to him because he like ditched her or whatever. I forget exactly what happened, but there was also that thing where like the main character encountered the guy who murdered his mom, which is kind of fucked up. But hey, like, he tried to get his revenge, couldn't quite pull it off. So that between those two things, those are about the only mildly interesting things that happened in this season. The new characters are just whatever, the most one-dimensional archetype characters ever. Don't really do anything significant anyway. Even like the character, like, season 1 ended with him whisking away his teacher girl from her, arranged marriage. Even that teacher girl doesn't feel like she does anything, really. She's just, there to be conveniently good at magic when they need it. Same with the pink-haired spirit girl. Even like there's a lot of like supporting characters who are just completely forgettable. Like, none of it feels like it really builds upon itself. It's just things just start happening, and not a lot of it means anything, if any of it. Again, there's another one that just doesn't really do anything for me, especially because the main character is the most forgettable motherfucker on planet Earth. Good thing he's not on planet Earth. He got isekai'd. Saving me the trouble. KamiErabi season 2. I don't know if I have the energy left to talk about this, because this is completely bewildering in a lot of the same ways Tasuketsu was, but also in a completely new way. Oh my fucking god. I don't think I honestly, I don't know if I can do this. The way it builds from season 1 doesn't really make that much sense, and especially initially, and even how it like builds on itself is just completely baffling. Like, I'd forgotten a lot of the characters from season 1 by the time I started this one. A lot of them are complete mysteries to me, and just the way the abilities work and like why anything was happening is just bizarre. And then they started lore dropping towards the end of this season, and by god, it fucking was goddamn fucking baffling. I don't even know if I want to spoil it. You know what? Fuck it. I'll spoil it. I don't even care. Who fucking cares? No one watched this shit. It was garbage anyway. Turns out the whole world they're in is an AI-generated world that some guy made happen moments before fucking nukes exploded the actual planet Earth. So it put everyone into a forced dreamlike state where they're basically hallucinating millions of years worth of life in the frame of real life, a fraction of a second. Which is dumb already. It sucks. Why even bother with that garbage? And then that's the world that the story takes place in, right? And the AI like determines that that world needs a god, and that's why the KamiErabi thing is happening. But we never learn the exact reason why Goro, is that his name? Probably because he has the same name as Goro Akechi. Goro, we never learn why he's actually an anomaly. He just is God for some reason. He's just like a godlike presence who just like showed up one day and like all of a sudden he was like destined to be God or whatever. I don't know. He's like born to be a winner. Born to be the winner of the God game. And the new child who turns out to be the actual God is weird as hell. Because like the God's motivations only vaguely make sense because he like wanted to find a being who could stand on equal ground with him or something. And that ended up being Goro, who was like forcibly re-manifested into the corporeal plane of existence, even though it's not. It's the AI generated corporeal plane. And god damn it, like a bunch of characters die. You remember that bitch who like betrayed Goro in the first episode and like of season 1 and then came back to life? Like she's alive and then dies again and then comes back. It's like she comes back in like the fucking weird dream sequence or whatever, and like Goro rewrites the whole planet and like forcibly rewinds time or what. I think he probably does pull another Sonic 06. I can't remember. God, I don't remember anything. But like basically all the side characters except like the guy who was Goro's best friend pretty much are like worthless. And like the idol girl, I think she did something, but like a lot of them were just there to like have powers, you know, like have powers that could force the plot along. And the child becoming God is fucking stupid because like the child, it's like in episode 1 of season 2, it like starts out with the child giving a presentation about like the KamiErabi or something. He's getting laughed off stage, he's throwing tomatoes at him. Boo! Oh brother, this guy stinks. The child's like 10. It turns out he's God and like starts evil laughing and shit. It's fucking wild and not really in a good way. It doesn't make any sense. Like the lore drops, it's like, yeah, okay, you know, like you explained things away in a way that is mildly acceptable, but also why? Like, because I don't even remember the reason the actual Earth was about to explode. I don't remember why. If I don't remember, it probably sucked. It's just like a lot of things just, again, I've said this before a couple of times in this roundup, it just does a lot of things and a lot of them don't feel important. I think it does give enough time to like the whole God versus God angle, Goro versus God angle. I think that like towards the end has enough time to really fester. But every other character I could not give two fucks about. Even Goro I don't really care about. Basically every character I could not give two shits about. Like this whole fucking story is just insane. I would almost not be surprised if Okubo actually had some hand in it. Aside from just designing the characters. Alright, Arifureta Season 3. It's only about halfway done so far, but this is definitely the most fun I've had watching a season of Arifureta, I think. I think it like a lot of shows like this in its later seasons, it feels like it's become a lot more self-aware of how kind of stupid it is. And it's taking advantage of that in a good way. But I also think some of the plot, the story beats are fairly good. The bunny human uprising comes to mind. Even like the labyrinth that they went into, the Great Labyrinth, whatever one they went into in the second quarter of this one, not bad. Like it has a lot of sort of goofy little puzzles that they have to deal with and like challenges they overcome that are kind of fun. I think if you came back for this third season of Arifureta, you're like, yeah, I got what I came for. Edgy Hajime and his crew of women of various female character archetypes who all crush on him. So yeah, I do think this is the most fun I've had watching Arifureta with this season for sure. I'm not gonna wait till next seasonal roundup to cover this. It's Arifureta, like yeehaw. I don't particularly care for it that much, but it is reasonably enjoyable. So. Alright, Danmachi, Season 5. Again, this one's a little far. Still got a ways to go, but I've actually been enjoying this one so far. Danmachi really likes to start off inconspicuous. New seasons of Danmachi really start off inconspicuous and then sort of develop and take a crazy turn, a little bit into it. Definitely happened for this one. I kind of wish the whole Freya thing had been like festering, like boiling in the proverbial pot for a bit longer. And maybe it had been, I just wasn't paying attention to previous seasons, but like her obsession with Belle feels like it comes out of nowhere. You know, like there were signs in previous seasons that I just shrugged off because I wasn't paying enough attention or whatever, but Either way, I think what it has done so far has been pretty enjoyable and like builds off what happened. Like it goes in a new direction with everything, which is fine. In this case, Danmachi is a pretty big world that it needs to explore, and I think again it's one of those that hasn't set up too much that it won't be able to eventually knock down, right? And this is another sort of check off the bucket list, this whole Freya garbage. Regarding the whole Seer stuff, right? Like Danmachi is in a weird position where I feel like the authors set up like way too many women who had a passing crush on Belle, and now has to sort them all out so that when Eyes eventually becomes endgame, there's not like a fuckload of potential love interests like in the way of that. But it also doesn't want to just write them off for no reason, right? But at the same time though, with Seer, like it simultaneously feels like this might have been the plan all along for her, right? Because she was just some sweet girl who was just kind of there and never really had any significance to the plot. She was just some nice waitress lady who would blush around Belle. So her situation evolving into this Freya thing, it almost feels like that could have been the plan all along, but it also just as much feels like it could have been something that the author decided like halfway through and was like, what am I gonna do with this person? She's just some nice lady. But the twist as it was, conveyed to us, the viewers, I think is a good twist, and especially involving Horn and all that, like the twist with that as well. Like I think the twists and turns in the season have been good. Like the story it has been telling has been good, and like when Freya basically Ada's the entire world, like, or the entire city basically, like it's a good twists and turns. Like I like what it has done, even if I'm like, why is Freya doing all of this? Like, again, I just wish maybe I should have paid more attention. Maybe that's my bad and I'm just a big old idiot. Who knows? Aside from that, like, thematically, I like that, Hestia being one of the few who could resist Ada's charms. Ada. Hestia being one of the few that could resist Freya's charm spell. And like, because she's like the goddess of chastity or whatever the fuck, I don't know. But like she's able to like free everybody from the charm spell. And I think maybe it evolved a little too fast into the whole war game thing for me. Like it really took that turn. Like immediately after Hestia did the whole her thing, Freya was like, war game. She did war games. That was really surprising. And I guess it's not really hard. Like war game is like, have we seen a war game before? Because I actually can't remember. But it's not. I guess it's not really hard to guess her meaning, like what she means by war game. But like, I think it would have been a more impactful thing had we known what exactly a war game was. And maybe one has already happened before and I forgot. But yeah, that's kind of the nature of Danmachi, right? Like it does a lot of different things at its different seasons. Like not all of it is really connected to each other that much, if at all. But I mean, for what it is, I've definitely been enjoying this season. And I think the fights have been good as well. Like the action sequences are pretty well animated. So I'm very surprised Danmachi is still getting as much love from its creators this far in, like this many years later as it is. But it's one of those anime that's kind of like, all right, like, I'll watch the new season. All right, it's fucking, who cares? It's like after this many, this is my third time covering it, I'm pretty sure on the roundups. I'm like, I should have known by now that, of course, it was probably going to come out of nowhere and surprise me and be pretty good. So, yeah, and it did. So, fair enough, Danmachi. You win again. Danmachi 3, Gus 0. Alright, Blue Lock Season 2. I can animate better in Microsoft PowerPoint than about 90% of what this season looked like. But I think for what it was, it worked with what it had in a way that generally it was fine. Because the Blue Lock versus U20 game, in my opinion, is overall like the most sensibly strong part of Blue Lock so far. And since I covered this on the roundup when I initially talked about the first season of Blue Lock, I did read the manga almost immediately. So I was really looking forward to season 2, and it completely makes sense why they really hustled to get season 2 done, because after the events of the U20 game, there's like, you can obviously take a big break. You want to capitalize on the Blue Lock hype while it's there, and now you can like you could take a years-long break at this point, because now basically leading into what, they're probably going to do more Blue Lock anime. I'm sure they will. But like, season 1 left on the cliffhanger of like, you guys are going to face the U20s. Now the U20 game is over. The face Blue Lock, the Neo Egoist League, that can wait as long as it has to for season 3 to look better than this, hopefully. Yeah, the animation of this was not very good for the most part. It handled everything well. I think the pacing of the U20 game was good. It did everything it should have with the actual pacing of it. It just lacked the visual impact. Like, season 1 of Blue Lock didn't really have a whole lot of visual impact, but it looked a whole lot better than this. Like, there were a lot of PNGs being thrown around the screen in this season of Blue Lock. Even the 3D, like, 3D animation in a sports anime like this is completely understandable, but the 3D in this season didn't even look good. It was like, it really felt thrown together hurriedly in a rush. It really felt rushed to be put together, and I think it's just because they wanted to get the season out ASAP, like to capitalize on the hype as best they could. The visuals, like they do a lot of the visuals right still, right? Like they do, like especially like with Shido, a lot of Shido's moments come to mind. Rin comes to mind, like especially the moments where he finally goes into the flow state and like, because he does the whole tongue thing. It works, right? Like a lot of those visuals are good, but they're just poorly animated, so they just lack the full visual impact. And they still do the puzzle thing with Isagi well enough, and like there's, and even disregarding the actual adaptation of this, right? Like the U20 game is perfectly paced, right? Like it gives a moment for pretty much every character, including the ones who get swapped out and then swapped in, a chance to do something and significantly contribute to Blue Lock's eventual victory. The animation really suffered, and it doesn't look good. And it's such a shame, because the U20 game is so awesome. But thankfully, I almost want to give them a pass, because as they absolutely should have, 90% of the animation budget went into the final sequence, which it absolutely should have, because when I read that manga, Isagi scoring the final goal is one of like the very few moments where I like was reading manga and like shivered, like got the chills and shivered, like like everything had been building up to Isagi scoring that last goal. And it's true, like, because his trust that Rin would eventually overcome Sae and manage to clear the ball right into IQ's blind spot where Isagi could get a direct shot into the goal, it'd been the culmination of everything that had happened in the U20 game thus far. Where like the evolution of Rin like being pushed over the edge into the flow state, like Isagi slowly being able to connect more and more with Rin's plays and understand him better, like it is the culmination of everything. So that last sequence from Rin and Sae's final face-off until Isagi scores that goal was awesome. Not perfect by any means. I think some of the animation even in that sequence was a little shoddy, but it was leagues and leagues better than the rest of the season, I'll tell you that much. The only other like scene that comes to mind is about halfway through they dive into Rin's backstory with Sae, and that had a similar thing where the screen kind of and they actually took the animation up a notch. And that comes to mind as well. That was the remaining 9% of the budget, and the rest of the 1% went into everything else. But yeah, like just the Blue Lock Universe U20 game is so fucking awesome, and it just could have been done so much more justice if they'd waited on this. Like, episode Nagi came out earlier, well, it would have been 2024, I believe it was 2024, maybe late 2023. Episode Nagi was not that long ago, and I'm sure a lot of it was probably some amount of reused footage from season 1, but still, this could have been way better. It's just such a shame. I get why they did it as fast as they could, but it suffered for it, and it's such a shame. Alright, lastly, 2 core and also sequel, Tower of God Season 2. Tower of God is a wildly crazy world. I've mentioned a couple times that in this roundup video, shows will do their world building. They'll set up just the right amount of moving pieces that don't overwhelm you, and it feels like will eventually be knocked down and explained and piques your interest without overwhelming you. Tower of God does the opposite. Tower of God evolves its story in a way that is baffling to me. And it introduces a lot of parts of this world that don't really fit with what happened in season 1. Like, it's fine to evolve in new directions, obviously, but like so many things it tries to introduce here, like, and a lot of the characters go in different directions than I felt like is natural from season 1. It just feels like it evolves in a way that is different from the author's original vision, if that makes sense. There's so many things that are just so strange. Like after the events of season 1, it should have put more emphasis on discovering the mysteries of the tower itself that had been sort of teased in season 1, but instead we got a bunch of new things. We saw the guide or whatever that showed up in episode 1 of Tower of God. We saw her like maybe twice in the 26 episodes this went for. Grand total of like 1 minute of screen time. So we have still no clue what she's doing or why she's there or what she does or why anything. A bunch of new problems. Emily, whatever, the AI Emily, who's like actually a girl, comes to mind, but also isn't resolved in this season. She's introduced and then not resolved in the time frame of this season. So why even bother? By the way, the final scene of this season is them eating with like one of the tower fucking moderators or whatever, who's like a bad guy in the last season, I'm pretty sure, who like changed his ways for some reason during the workshop battle. I don't get it. It introduces a fuckload of new characters right off the bat in season 2, and it just does so many things, and I feel like all of them lack weight. And while I do think all of that, I do think that this is a genuinely pretty fun watch, because I do think the characters, even though they introduced a lot of new ones that don't feel like they contribute a lot, they're all right. Like, they're not bad characters per se. Maybe some of them are definitely one-dimensional or even just two-dimensional. It's not like it's not fun or not enjoyable, because I do think it's enjoyable. It's just the way that this story evolved from season 1 doesn't really make sense to me. And even besides that, the animation in this season is not very good at all. Like, we waited how many years for this? And this is what we got? It doesn't really look all that good. There's some more PNGs flying around here. I think introducing a new set of major characters is fine on paper, but it just takes the story in all kinds of weird directions that I don't particularly like. And like, I think the angle of like Bomb becoming Thug or whatever, and like, you know, being inducted in them and gaining control over his innate abilities and stuff, I think all of that is fine. And like, he eventually meets back up after a long time with his previous allies, like the alligator and blue-haired boy. All of that is fine, like, in theory, but again, it just introduces a lot of other moving pieces. Like, there's another research facility where like one of the new main characters was being tested on or whatever, and like he was sort of a success, but there was this other guy who was with him but also on the loose, and there's a bunch of other characters who like kind of get introduced but only play a minimal role. The girl who like kind of becomes a cult leader or whatever, or like tries to turn Bomb into a cult leader comes to mind. Like, why was she even there? And even like the main bad guy of the season that Bomb fights in like the last few episodes, I'm like, I don't even know who he is. I wasn't paying enough attention. But yeah, it just doesn't really make sense the direction that they took this in. It didn't follow up with a lot of things from season 1 like I think it should have. You know, instead of following up with things from season 1, it kind of just introduced a bunch of new things that now it eventually has to resolve, you know? And Rachel, she was the bitch who fucking pushed Bomb out of the bubble at the end of season 1. She doesn't really do anything. So, like, that major plot point from season 1, Rachel's betrayal, is a big nothing burger in season 2. Which is a fucking unbelievable misfire on their part. Like, I don't know. I know this is a long-ass manga, and, like, there's plenty of time for everything to get resolved, but in the context of the anime, it's so baffling. Again, I don't think this is not enjoyable. It's just so weird. It just does a lot of new things that I didn't have a reason to care about before, and then when it introduces them into this story that's already ongoing with a fuckload of things already happening that still need to be resolved, I just don't have the capacity to care about it all. Maybe it'll probably get season 3 at some point. Maybe another 4 years from now. Yeehaw. Alright. That's all for this roundup. I'll see you all next season, where we have a buttload of random garbage happening this upcoming season. A buttload of random garbage. Won't be until spring that we have a lot of cool stuff again. But there's some cool stuff happening this season. Sakamoto Days is happening. Honestly, that could be the whole season. I'm happy just getting Sakamoto Days. God, that's hype. That's fucking hype. Let's go. What else is there? Guild Receptionist. Mona. What else? Bunch of random garbage.